it's a private practice in art conservation.
Can you speak up just a little
Sure.
if you can?
It's a private practice art conservation company, and we're based here in East Dallas. We're just a little bit over, we're by Fair Park, over by 30, so this is my backyard. This is literally my neighborhood. And we've been working here again 23 years. And normally when you think of, I'm a sculptor, art conservator, normally when you think of art conservation, this comes to mind. It's always a picture of somebody swabbing and cleaning a painting or something like that. That's what we generally picture as art conservation. But what if oil paintings on a steel door that's 100 years old? So we have restored over 300 vault doors in the state of Texas for the courthouse initiative in 23, it's well over 300 doors now.
Wow.
So we're dealing now with Callahan County, Mason County. Mason, of course, was a case of arson. Somebody burnt down the courthouse. We're restoring cast iron fireplaces and things like that. So we have halfway modern work and halfway historic work, preservation work. We do some really interesting projects. This is a Jack Lubin mural from the Sapphire Hilton Hotel. This was hidden behind, they had nailed it behind a sheetrock wall in the 80s.
Very pretty.
And it nailed through it, and we literally had to make a special hanging facility. We took it, steamed it off of the wall, and restored it, and it's back now at the hotel, the Sapphire Hilton.
Wow.
Hall of State, we did the metal leafing on the restored roof. This is in the Hall of Heroes as you walk in. So again, we had our people come up and put the actually aluminum leaf foil glue that onto the roof or to the ceiling. There's 5 sets of bronze doors at the Hall of State. They were neglected literally from 1936. The original finishes were let to fall off, and then all of a sudden, back in the 80s, some idiot decides sandblasting is the way to fix them. Completely messed them up. The sand had trapped things down the armatures, and that had completely rotted. It was literally rust holding them back together. We had to replace over 18,000 hardpoint armature pieces to get them back to speed. So next time you're at the Hall of State, look at those doors. They're quite magnificent. And then we had the original Pegasus from Magnolia Building. This is not the facsimile. The one that you see up there, that's a copy. This is the original one. And they had said it was too far gone to be restored. And I looked at it and I said, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. They found it, they lost it. They found it in a barn. And it just had 70 years of dirt and rust and things on, and some bullet holes, by the way. Texans just love shooting stuff, don't they?
That's true.
So we built special baths, chemical baths. Over 700 pounds of chemicals were used, dissolved in water. Eco-friendly, by the way.
Yay.
And that's what it looked like once it was restored. A little bit of touch-up. It's enamel on steel. So it's basically glass on steel. And that now is up at the Omni Hotel downtown. So when you look at that one at the Omni Hotel turning around on that derrick, that's the original one that was up there.
Yeah. You did a very good job.
Thank you.
Wow.
Downtown, we had a Tony Lieberman's sculpture. The new tenant of the building decided they wanted a car entrance valet thing. I don't know what is wrong with Texans that can't park their own cars. So they donated the sculpture to the city of Dallas. And it stood, it was taken down and it was taken to Hensley Field. They eventually decided, oh, we're now going to put the sculpture back up at Love Field. And the problem, once they decided what to do with it, was it had been cut apart, dumped in the field, without a single drawing, reference, measurement, and everything was all completely taken away. And we had to figure out how it goes back together without drawings. Now if it's 40 foot tall and you're 1 inch out, it will translate to 4 foot out. So it had to be very delicately balanced because it's 33,000 pounds of steel.
Oh, wow.
So we built a maquette, 1/12 scale, and we worked with photographs backwards and forwards until we eventually got the original composition and balance. And then we had to build it laying down. So on-site laying down. You can see it was a bit of a challenge. That gives you an idea of the scale. And that's when we first put it up. It had to be floating on 2 separate cranes that swung into position. That gives you an idea of the size of it. If you look at the chaps at the bottom there. And now we have, I think, one of the most iconic pieces at Love Field. So we worked on the big flying, the wing figure at the front. We worked on this one, and we've got some other ones at Love Field. Here's another iconic piece in Dallas. This is the Virgin of Guadalupe at St. Anne's, and they asked me, of course, St. Anne's is in the old Little Mexico area. Kind of like my neighborhood. I'm on the wrong side of I-30, redlined from the 50s to the 70s. So all that neighborhood was cleaned out, and the school stood, but there was a big cry they were going to take it down, demolish the building, but the soft tiles couldn't be taken off. The Portland cement was too fixed at the back, would damage them to take them off. So we had to engineer a way of literally taking the whole wall with it. And now it stands on Harwood Street, the original Virgin of Guadalupe, in its nice little place. But that was the original wall moved into place. So sometimes you do these crazy things.
Harwood and what?
Harwood and down there.
Yeah, it's,
How about the old St. Anne's?
It's the one that leads
It's where the
into
restaurant is.
it's the
Right across
yeah,
the
the restaurant. I'm trying to think if that's Harwood. Anyway, it kind of butts into it. Yeah.
Is that near Ross?
Of course, there's the job that we really got a lot of coverage with. This is the mosaics out of the Mercantile Annex building.
Oh, wow.
That came down,
It's real old.
and that's mid-century modern. It's Millard sheets. So the city was given, again, the collection of art, and then the engineer said, no, it can't be taken off the walls. And we said, well, the Italians put it up, we can take it down. All these mosaics came, 97 mosaics out of the Mercantile building. They are now stationed in the Jewel Hotel. So the entire collection has been saved, and it is in the Jewel Hotel.
Y'all look for that now.
So here's another bit of a tragedy. On Gaston Avenue, we had a wonderful mid-century modern church, done very interesting in 1964. Octavio Medellin was the artist, very iconic Dallas artist. Fused glass windows, 40 stories, 40 foot up, and some panels on the side. So it had to be saved, so we took them all apart. Dallas found a place at Love Field. They said, well, we want this stuff in our ticketing hall. Now you've got a problem. You've got a 40 foot piece of fused glass in 4 panels, and you've only got about 20 foot here. So what we did is we turned the composition sideways. It's a wonderful thing of repurposing art. We turned the composition sideways and built these frames that continue the graphic continuity and spread it into 4 compositions. And that now, putting it together,
Wow.
we couldn't transport it with the glass in place. So what we did is we made a public exhibition of doing the work. And we had the public watching us put it together on site. can see this is fused glass. It's not stained glass. It's glass that's melted together.
Wow. Didn't know you could do that.
Hung it up. And if you go to the ticketing hall, they're just lovely pieces of paint art that now you can see, you know, the light transfers through it, and they're just really pretty.
Do they have a sign there with the history of it?
No.
Oh.
They were going to do that, but somehow speak to cultural affairs about that. So the signs on the panel, the ones on the side of the building, those were moved into the meaty performance hall. And we built special light boxes for them, and we have them, you can see, it was a kind of conscious thing to make light coming from behind it so that it kind of looked like they were floating off of the wall. But it's a very, very successful repurposing of art that was going to end up in the landfill to a new location.
It's very pretty.
So when it comes to things like conservation, you have to manage a project compared to what you're doing, and it's a very different approach to just construction or making art from scratch. But the most important thing that you have to do is visualize your outcome and manage expectations. And one of the things that we have a big problem with is people wanting things to look new again. Budgets that are unmanageable. So it becomes a thing of just your hardest part of the job is to manage the expectations of either the public or the private people involved. And we deal with all the museums. That's why I love dealing with museums, institutions, things like that. We don't have that crazy expectations. The other thing is to figure out what you're actually looking at. And this is another thing, that we're all deceived by what we see. Let me give you a perfect example. We all know what a copper penny is, right?
Yep.
There's not a single copper penny in this country. The copper, these are ancient copper coins. Those are called bronzes. They're actually made out of bronze alloy. So it's a tin bronze alloy. The later editions that we have here are zinc that are plated with copper. So we call it a copper penny, and we tend to think it's copper, but we don't have. It's a copper alloy, sure, but it's not a copper coin. So you've got to figure out what your appearance is, whether you're looking at shellac, wax, dirt. What is it you're looking at? And this comes back to our chandelier that we're about to look at. Here's a perfect example. This is a 19th century, about 1890s door. It's made to look it's from a courthouse. It's made to look like the arts and crafts movement at the time, at the turn of the century. So you can see it's got the wear marks where you would be patinated copper over that. And there you've got the wear marks from people opening the door. It's actually patinated like that. It's a steel door handle that is copper plated and then treated to make the illusion of a worn copper handle. That's 100 years ago. Here's another example. You all collect antiques and see antiques, right? This shows you all the characteristics of a well-loved patination. It's a bronze. You can see the hand mark, the little, where people touch it. It's a little cherub, it's about that big. You can see it's got the nice deepening. It's been waxed and loved over the years. And that's how a good bronze should look. It's a fake. I fixed it the day before. The day before it looked like that. I'd welded a hole up in the stomach, put back together, and patinated. So we're antique dealers' worst nightmare. We can make things look, and I've fooled a lot of people, but you've got to realize that a lot of these finishes you see can be remade and rematched. Just to give you an idea, that's the same door handle with different metal finishes. This is not paint, these are patinas. These are chemicals that are bonded chemically or at an atomic level to the metal. It's basic, all sorts of rust and decay but by making chemical compounds, we can get the crystals to cut in all these different colors. And believe me, they come in a lot of colors. Here's a perfect example of a Belle Epoque piece of sculpture. It was meant to be cast iron, French Belle Epoque style, but the paint started wearing off, and we started noticing there was little traces of gold and bronze, so we stripped it all. It turns out to be bronze. We then stripped all the paint off, and there you can see classic decay from, remember in the 1970s when the high acid rain, it was melting the limestone in Europe. It was causing these huge black streaks. That's from sulfur in the air, in the petrol,
Wow.
combining with nitrogen and other things that coming down as acid rain. We took that out of the fuel, and it's not happening as badly now as it was in the 1970s. So we can affect our climate and the effect that it has on our art. But instead of taking all that oxide off and trying to fix it to look brand new, we helped it along with a few chemicals and a little bit of heat, and then we put some wax on there. And we end up with this lovely worn. So we're not trying to make it look brand new, but we're trying to sort of mitigate those ugly black lines that destroy the continuity of the piece. And today, as modern conservation, we have a lot of new tools that we didn't have before. We can 3D map items, so we can then keep a graphic record. So if anything catastrophic should happen, we still can model that to piece. And we can plan out our strategy for repairs much easier. And then we can even print at any scale a little reproduction of the piece. That's the winged line from the Bishop's House, I believe, in Galveston.
Yes.
Bishop's House. Which brings us to our local hero. So when I saw it, I immediately said, well, I can see it's silver plated maybe. It had been in the records of being silver, but I knew that it was, I knew there was silver on there, but it could have been silver plated brass, or which is normal, which is actually quite often. You see your cutlery, EPNS, electroplated nickel, silver, and all of these types of things. But looked up close, and this black, I immediately also knew that there was a gas leak in the building. And people, how do you know that? Well, mercaptan is a sulfur stenching agent, which is added to gas, natural gas. It's for our safety because you can't see the flame. It makes the flame turn blue, and it makes you smell it if it's leaking. So you had a bad gas leak here, and I immediately said to Max, "You just got a gas leak here." And he said, "How did you know?" So that's just a good hint. So if you see your silverware or your granny's teapot turning blue or black very quickly, call the gas company.
Good to know.
So we got it down, took it apart, and then we started seeing some of the horrors. You can really start to see how that black, and the black oxide was kind of crumbly, and that's because somebody at some stage had coated this in their genus in polyurethane. Polyurethane should never be put on anything, quite frankly. But we discovered that we found there was a lot of differences. You can see there's sections of the pendants that are cast, they're different castings. It's not from the same mold, it's not the same repeat. So some of them, I think this has been composite over the years from several different pieces. It didn't start life as one piece. It had candles on it first, and then it was a gas lamp, and then it was electrical after that. And it's probably been altered several times, but some of these pieces were missing, and some had been facsimilated, but they're definitely two different generations. And you see a lot of the breaks. And here we found some hallmarks. So these are probably the very first mark up nearest the hole. That is probably an original silversmith's mark. It's an older style. The next one there is probably a 19th century, sort of mid-19th century hallmark of somebody who had taken parts, repaired it. These things have gone backwards and forwards over their years, have been repaired, modified. It maybe had things that out, but that's not, so you see the two different kinds of hallmarks.
Is it usual for something to be silver to be remarked like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not an antiques person, but you often see this. Let's say somebody that has repurposed a thing or repaired it might put a mark on it. Not a common practice in England, but in the continent, yeah.
Thank you.
And here you can see, obviously, this looks like an early 20th century hallmark. And you can see from the stamp that this is probably the company that put it back together for the last time before it was sold as an antique. No, I'm just speculating, you know.
Do you stamp it too?
No. We leave no, as conservators, we want to go in and leave like we were never there. However, we do write a report, usually on certain things, where we say if we had a major change, that report then becomes part of the provenance of the people, of the owner. Sometimes you'll put it inside of a piece, but generally speaking, that belongs to the provenance of the people, and it's their custodianship that has to move that information to say that we have repaired it at some stage. And remember, repairs are supposed to be reversible. In metalwork, there's no such thing as a reversible weld, you know. Here you can really see some of the damage and modifications. You can see the screw put in there. That's so that it can come apart. But that had been repaired several times, so we had to do a little work on that. We also discovered that if you look at the little chess piece, or whatever you want to call the finial that's in the middle, there was no pattern to the up which way they were pointing. So whoever assembled it the last time just, we kind of found a random, we figured out a random thing. So we shuffled a few pieces around to get them hanging a little bit better. But it's all just careful, painstaking handwork. This is Lolita. She's using strippers, chemical strippers, to slowly get the bond, the urethane to break apart, and then cleaning it with alcohol and mineral spirits and things like that. We also had a huge amount of lead repairs to remove a lot of lead repairs. A lot of them we haven't removed 100% of the lead repair, but often you'll find with large silverware, it'll be repaired, particularly in the 1930s up until like the 70s with lead, and often replated on top of the lead. But this is very similar to sterling silver. This is a silver copper alloy. Interestingly enough, having come out of Spain, it's almost certain that the silver would have come out of Mexico. So the fact that it's come back to Texas is the main spar, the main rod that holds it together is iron, but was silver plated, and we didn't we cleaned it up, and then we didn't immerse it in plating solution to put new silver on it. We brush plated, which is you take a wand and basically rub some silver on there with an electrical charge, and it deposits a certain amount of silver on there. So we didn't change the original parts that we had. And this was our nightmare. All the S-hooks holding it together were completely, some coat hanger wires, some were pieces of copper, and a couple of them were sterling silver. So I said to Max, we were just talking about this. I said, well, to replace all the silver wire is going to be about almost $2,000 worth of silver. Silver has gone through the roof, and particularly that gauge of silver. So we settled on using silver-plated copper wire and just standardized on all of those things. And with the leftover real silver, we took it and we formed rings and things where they were all dubious and bad things. We basically brazed those back with silver alloy back into position so that it would be sound and mechanically sound again. Ultimately, it's just lots and lots of handwork once it's cleaned, handwork and polishing. We use very technical polishes, German polishes that are not acidic, but it's just lots of, you can't use a machine, it's just handwork. And the hardest thing we have is getting anybody under 30 not to grab a power tool. Have you given somebody under 30 a screwdriver without a battery on the end of it? They have no idea.
Where does this plug in?
Yeah. So we went from that to that. So it's, and what it has been coated with a nitrocellulose lacquer, a traditional lacquer to protect it, which should give you a good 10 years or more before it would have to be redone. And that means simply, and it's very easy to remove that lacquer, repolish it, and set it back again. But it will depend on your environment, because things move through, they go through all those lacquers and materials. All right, that's it. Thank you.
That surprised you how many steps and how intricate it was.